All right. Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Anthony Santoriello, and today for our American Horror Research presentation video, I will be discussing the topic of vigilantism. Um, to start off, tell you a little bit about me. I'm from New Jersey, born and raised, and I am a teacher of students with disabilities. Um, the topic of vigilantism, with some of the connections of the works that we've gone over this semester, kind of hit home a little bit, especially when I um, do some connections in this video around the Titty Follies that we watched over the course of the semester. But to dive into the actual research and the video itself, today I wanted to discuss how vigilantism has played out over American history, and a shining example there. Um, how vigilantism is both implicitly and explicitly expressed by some of the writers and directors and their works that we have viewed and read this semester. And like I spoke about before, how the Titicup Follies may have accidentally expressed vigilantism, but um, did it in a different manner. And that is truly the defining debate that I want this video to explicitly express, is how vigilantism can be done in a nonviolent way and may have sparked a generation in a new form of vigilantism through media and less through the traditional acts of violence, which we will get into. So let's get started with what is vigilantism. So, coming directly from Merriam-Webster, a vigilante. So the person, a noun, a member of a volunteer committee organized to suppress and punish crime summarily as when the process of law is viewed as inadequate. In layman's terms, taking matters into one's own hands. So, broadly from Merriam-Webster, a self-appointed doer of justice. So, doer of justice in the 21st century, a doer of justice we see as a form of authority, whether that be um, police officers, a judge, someone with legal bound or the community agreeing upon, whether that be voted in or by occupation, somebody who has a say in the overall justice of something or someone. So, in vigilantism, taking that into your own hands when people don't see it as adequate, what those people in those positions of power do can lead to a lot of things. But the way that we've seen it traditionally portrayed, um, starting with maybe the first and most significant act of vigilantism in American history, the Boston Tea Party. Um, Americans or colonists at the time took matters into their own hands as they saw fit, were the self appointed doers of justice, as there was an overbearing monarchy that was suppressing the colonists at the time, putting taxes on what at the time may have been one of the largest traded commodities, tea, and having extreme value to the monarchy. The doers of justice, the colonists, took it, dump it in the ocean. Is it an act of violence? Yes, there were shots. I believe the total number is low, maybe on a handful, and I have to look back into my research for it. But there were deaths. There was violence at the root of it. There is an act of bloodshed or something along that justice, but people taking matters into their own hands when they see fit. So, I think it's important to set the scene there, no pun intended, because other forms of media through writing and video that we've seen and reviewed this year express these same types of vigilantism. So, and when I say same types, I mean in the traditional nature of violence or some physical act of doing to have the outcome that they see fit, preferred that the overall seers of justice did not. So, to start, Young Goodman Brown by Hawthorne, I think doesn't explicitly talk about vigilantism, but there is a root there for the time. So when we think about the Puritans, um, who were the leaders of overseeing justice at the time. There's a point in time where young Goodman Brown is immediately conflicted on what act of violence he is about to go and do with the other Puritan men, and that's truly what the story is more about. But the acts that they were about to do are not from a governing body. There is the scene where young Goodman Brown stands with the old man and the staff, and the old man and the staff talks about how he stood with the priests. So he's kind of seen as somebody in the light of the community as a shining figure, being that priests at the time were kind of the, I guess, political stature in the community. Um, so it goes to show that it's kind of accepted. It's not explicitly talked about that the priest is giving this um, act to be, or excuse me, I guess job to be acted upon. But the men of the Puritan community saw fit to take matters into their own hand and eliminate or kill, murder the witches. Um, Now the story is more about young Goodman Brown finding his faith being conflicted, but there's an act of vigilantism there. People taking matters into their own hands. No real rule or act from a governing body to say do that, and people committing violence. Another way we saw it a little bit more explicitly shown, violence wise, is in Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead. It is literally kill or be killed. There is no governing body to save anybody at this time. It is a influx of ghouls and zombies. So literally, people are vigilante justice in the sense of it's acceptable. If vigilantism is acceptable at any times, but for fictional purposes and in the movie, let's say that it is. But there's an act of, hey, no one says kill these people, but people take matters into their own hands because they are going to be killed. No one is coming to save them. We explicitly see that with Ben. Killing off ghouls almost the entirety of the video movie. But the more, I guess, explicit act of vigilantism is at the end, unfortunately, when Ben is murdered by the mob or the militia that comes through with the police officers involved. Yes, so there are officials involved in there, but there are men involved who are not, who are civilians armed, killing the ghouls and zombies. Kill Ben. Yes, there is deeper meaning there that Romero is going for, but that is not my topic that I was speaking about today. But that is a direct act of vigilantism in the sense of a militia, a mob, civilians armed. Sometimes, I guess, in this sense, with a governing body because they're coming together. I guess as there's an invasion of this new trope of an unknown figure that is seen now in this work in horror. So maybe it's more along the lines of community policing, but violence, civilians doing what they see fit need to do. Um, that finally also brings me to, let's go down here, another real form of American vigilantism. Um, there was calls for acts of violence against one person, and there were people taking arms out of fear. And I want to talk about how vigilantism took over the American psyche during the 1938 broadcast of Welles's War of the Worlds from Mercury Theater. So that was a little bit of a different one, right? Because now we've talked about a book that has some topics of vigilantism and some tropes of folklore, and then we've jumped over to Night of the Living Dead and how it's talked about this new trope of the unknown creature attacking and somebody having to take arms and kill now. Um, Vigilantism, but in Welles's Mercury Theater broadcast of War of the Worlds, it scared Americans to the point of feeling the need to be vigilantes because they were being invaded by creatures from Mars. Um, Now we're going back from fiction, or we're kind of molding the world of fiction and real life scared Americans with an act of vigilantism. But there's a picture of William Dock in Schwartz's Smithsonian Magazine article about how the War of the Worlds was never supposed to be what it was. That's a topic for another day. Um, but the vigilantism that came from that were people taking up arms. There was no call from the American government. People knew this was a radio broadcast. People thought that it was not explicitly told enough that it was fictional. And there were calls to senators and congressmen with angry mobs outside, calling for Wells to be jailed, to be things to happen to him. That is vigilantism at its finest again, um, in a sense of how we saw it across our media that we viewed this semester. But now that we've talked about what vigilantism is, how we've seen it, how it is traditionally portrayed in both real life American events as well as fictional media works, I want to talk about the Titicut Follies and how whether Wiseman intended to be a vigilante from this, or if it was on accident. And honestly, regardless, and I thought it was important to talk about my career in the beginning because regardless, what came from this film significantly improved the lives of the community that I work with. So that's why I kind of want to talk about this, and it's a little bit more personal and close to home. But vigilantism, as seen through the Titicut Follies, documentary-based film. Romero, there's acting, there's choreography, there's makeup. Is a very first time thing in the genre. Well, no, I guess not. I take that back because there are films that date back to vampires and werewolves that involve makeup, but it was a visual feature of a fictional character. Um, and then to the imagery back in Hawthorne's Goodman Brown, they're all and sorry, and even the creatures from Mars are all fictional horror, sorry, fictional creatures in the horror genre that is a trope. But how did Wiseman become a vigilante or express vigilantism in his film by non-violent? I think was his use of um, his minimalistic filming, and that becoming a trope of horror itself. I think it's immediately non-violent because he was inflicting no violence upon the people that were inflicting the atrocities of the deemed criminally insane of Bridgewater State Hospital. Instead, what he did, in my eyes, and I kind of wrote about this in my discussion piece, was morally made the decision that what will make the biggest impact. What tools did he have? He did not have guns. He did not have weapons. He is one man. How does he make a change? Vigilante. It was with his camera. So him with a very small crew, minimal choreography, obviously because it's a documentary, or excuse me, there's some choreography, but it's very minimal. There's shots and there's scenes. There's the scene that a lot of people speak about in the Titicut Files because of how uncomfortable it is, but the feeding tube inserted into um, whether we know a consenting or an unconsenting patient as a deemed, you know, doctor or someone, when we think of a doctor, someone who takes care of us or is health conscious, um, feeds this person or pours this liquid fluid into the tube with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. You don't have to add a lot to that scene for it to be horror. If anybody thinks about putting themselves into that situation, that is a horrific scene. There's not much more that needs to be done to that. So by the minimalistic just filming of this, I think the point um, is pretty violent itself without actually being a physical violence. And I'm starting to run a little bit here, but the purpose of this was when the film itself came out, there was a positive movement, and there was change. I would consider Wiseman a vigilante because when he releases this film, it was on an American institution, right? The way we were treating people of this community at this time, horrific. Um, but he also goes on to make other films around American institutions like public school. It's a hot button debate. good and bad come from this, but him making these films invokes thought. No one is telling him to do this, but he's expressing thought. He's expressing um, opinions sometimes, but his minimalistic filming in the Titicut Follies, I think, you know, made people so uncomfortable with seeing what they seeing. Um, Fast forward 1990, the Americans Disability Act. So because of Wiseman's film and the uproar, and that's kind of what I want to get into now at this part of the film, the uproar from the American public as well as the Boston Legal and Justice Department trying to suppress the film, um, I think immediately again shows that it is a topic of vigilantism. Somebody from a non-governing body or somebody in power doesn't or has something to say and does something about it. And in that, rallied a tremendous amount of people to then question and hold those people of power accountable as well. And at no point was there bloodshed, was there a shot fired. It is absolutely horrible. Again, what the people went through, and yes, I think I discussed this with a few classmates in my discussion as well about could he have put a report in? He went back and forth a few times and saw it, 100%. Um, what good would one report from one man do at that time? Maybe he did it before. There were other people in the hospitals that said they've done reports before, but by taking this and putting it out there to the masses, a non-violent positive change to happen. So the ADA Act. So let's talk about what the ADA Act is, so people kind of know the positive change that came from this film and the thoughts that people had on maybe it's not right that we treat that community like that. The ADA Act directly from their website. So this is from the Civil Rights Division of, excuse me, the ADA Act passed, this quote directly from the U.S. Department of Civil Rights Division. So, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that sustainably limits one or more major life activities. That is what someone at Bridgewater State Mental Hospital may have deemed somebody as criminally insane. Has a history of a record of such impairment, such as cancer, that is in remission. Not titty cut follies, but again, somebody who could be taken advantage of because of something that they don't have control over, or is perceived by others as having such impairment. So, um, examples of that. The first two to three, not so much referred to as some positive change that may have come from Titicut Follies, but still needs to be taken care of. Cancers, diabetes, and HIV are people who are protected by the ADA Act, but more people that may have been seen by people like the Bridgewater State Hospital if Wiseman had never put his film out there. Post traumatic stress disorder, autism, cerebral palsy, deafness or hearing loss, vision, blindness or low vision, epilepsy, mobility disabilities such as those requiring the use of a wheelchair, walker, or cane. Those are all people and conditions that are viewed in the Titicut Follies. And those are all conditions and communities of people whose lives have improved through people viewing the Titicut Follies and saying, that's not right. We as civilians need to do something. Vigilantism. So, um, in summary, and to wrap this all up, I don't know if Wiseman planned to be a vigilantism. It sure seems like it based on some of my research on Wiseman, on Britannica, learning about other films that he made, like I talked about with Public School. Um, it sounds like he's somebody who wants to invoke thought. And it sounds like somebody who wants to invoke thought in a non-violent form. Um, to me, my personal definition of vigilantism, I think in modern day America and society, can be done in an extremely nonviolent way, as we've seen in similar forms of media being a pillar of evidence. We have the 21st century, killing of George Floyd. Someone was held accountable there because of civilians filming, not doing anything else but purely filming, opinionated or not, film being used by um, to acquire justice from the civilians, right? That's a shining example. I think that comes directly to mind, um, of how again maybe Wiseman's form of media being used as vigilantism is seen more today. because we have a lot more power with media and computers directly in our pocket. But nonetheless, vigilantism can be done in a nonviolent form. Vigilantism is seen across the horror genre in American society since the dawn of our country. And I really enjoyed speaking about this and the topics today. So thank you very much for your time. Um, you know, go out there, make a change, do it in a positive, nonviolent way, and we could all be nonviolent vigilantisms just or vigilantes, just like Wiseman. If we, see something we don't like and want others to, you know, have a thought on, but do it in a nonviolent way, obviously. So, cool. Thank you so much. Had a great semester and appreciate it.